Hare Om Namaha. Etang sa astaya pratmanishtam adhyasitang purvatamir mahadbhihi ahang tarishyami durantaparam tamo makundhagri nishevayeva. Quote, by becoming fixed in this service to the Supreme Paramatma, previously worshipped by great rishis and acharyas, I'll cross the insurmountable ocean of nescience by worship of the lotus feet of Mukunda. Can you guess my name? I'll tell you one time. You're to blame. You cannot light the fire of self-realization by pouring the water of illusion on it. Conditioned souls, entangled in any of today's 3 deviant bhakti groups, do not become enlightened or liberated. Following the 1977 disappearance of the founder Acharya Prabhupāda, each bogus Krishna cult falsely projects itself as a gateway to eternal life. It is anything but. Yad yesho prata devi maya visharadi matihi sampana eveti vidur Mihimni sve mahiyate. Quote, if and when the Devi Maya has subsided, enriched with an enlightened mind full of knowledge, the living entity thus becomes cognizant of and is situated in his own glory, unquote. Mihimni sve mahiyate. As a self-realized entity, you are very powerful and very glorious. This is the only reason to join any acclaimed spiritual organization. It is to take assistance from that institution in becoming a siddha. Siddha, a perfected being, is who you actually are, free from the upadhis covering an eternal spiritual spark, that spark possessing a personal relationship swarup with the Parameshvara, the Supreme Controller. Confidence that you are making progress in spiritual life is essential, and it has an intrinsic relationship with reliability. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra are the sources of reliable spiritual confidence. However, being misled by a bogus guru creates cracks in such confidence, even though the person so misled wanted to be cheated. Believing someone to be a sadhu when he is actually not even a pious person creates cracks, psychic cracks, as does unreliable scripture containing mistaken knowledge. Yet the powerful men of so-called ISKCON have a vested interest in blowing out of proportion the necessity of, or so-called centrality of, their institution. There are a number of reasons and methods for this used by these pseudo-transcendentalists to sow this seed in their followers. Some of the examples are obvious. A little over a decade ago, the Wikipedia page for ISKCON listed, as the successor to His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, it listed the successor to be the Governing Body Commission. It was so false and outrageous that it had to be taken down. And in an example already mentioned of a somewhat subtler effort to implant the wrong idea that the institution is the only source of confidence and reliability, what's another example? It's the massive book changes. These subversive developments are not accidental, although the motives behind them cannot be recognized by devotees with a poor fund of knowledge. If and when there are all kinds of egregious guru fall-downs, then a concomitant reaction will be that confidence cannot be placed in gurus anymore. You then get the emergence of rent acharyas. And this is what reinitiation was all about until Ridvik made it too dangerous to continue with the charade. Institutional guru means bogus guru. As such, the unfortunates who accept some guru who then slips up badly in so-called ISKCON, those unfortunates never develop full confidence in him. How can they? So we got guru here, and you lose faith in guru. And we got Shastra, and then when the book changes are there, you lose faith in Shastra. And as far as holy men are concerned, stupid sadhus do not give anything to those who consult them, as is also the case with weak yogis. At least in the beginning, before being misled by the cult, people engaged in bhakti yoga want more than what such so-called sadhus offer. When all three legs of the triad, namely Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, are thus broken, where's the shelter? Why, it must be the institution. And if you come to that conclusion, if you have entered the air quotes ISKCON wheelhouse to that extent, that is exactly where its leaders want you to be. They want you to be and to remember that you must remain a member in good standing in so-called ISKCON in order to, allegedly, have any confidence that you will achieve the spiritual world at the time of death via the institution's facilitation. This is what they want you to think. And what does that entail? It entails being in good standing with the governing body commission, of course. This devolving plot still works upon some people, but there were many in the late 70s and throughout the 80s who rebelled against it. That defiance produced the two splinter groups. They allegedly offer you shelter, free from the oppression of the air quotes ISKCON governing body, but that so-called shelter is nothing more than another deviant vortex which is just as unauthorized as so-called ISKCON. Something else besides the real seed of liberation. And when liberation we're talking about, it's the seed of vimukti, not just mukti. Something else besides that enters within you if you associate with and believe in any of those three deviant groups. Under their influence and association, you will never become enlightened in full knowledge. And you will never become cognizant of and situated in your own glory by such bad association. Each of them is absorbed in its own cult maya with its own distinct version and projection of illusory energy. If you associate with any one of them, you will become contaminated by that particular cult maya in the name of Krishna consciousness. So-called ISKCON, Neomat, and Ritwik are all deep fakes. They are all social engineered psyops and will work to have you become a fanatic or an institutional loyalist to and in your cult of choice. You can stick with it and put its blinders on, or you can choose to leave. However, if you stay in the thing for any length of time, you will then leave. If you break away, you will then leave after being scammed, shafted, shattered, and scattered. Rejection of any such cult is much better if it's done in advance. By hearing and reading about the air quotes ISKCON deviations and that of its two later splinter groups, and not joining any of them in the first place, you remain in much better shape on your spiritual journey. Prabhupada's former movement is now cracked into different factions, and that negative resultant can directly be traced back to the zonal acharyas of the late 70s and early 80s. The newcomers at that time were bamboozled by pretender Mahabhagavats who were allegedly Krishna-realized and allegedly just as deserving of worship as Prabhupada's worship. Eventually, they were all exposed. However, the 11 played every card they could from both the top and the bottom of their deck of their heady scam before that era of pretension was finally overthrown. With this as post facto context, there was a chance for the zonal deviation to have been eradicated in the mid-80s, but that required honesty. Yes, in due course, the previous fake had been upended, but the psyop continued in a different way. By the mid-80s, dishonesty had been woven into the fabric of a compromise movement, and those new, air quotes, ISKCON fundamentalists of the collegiate compromise were now representing it. Its leaders and their acolytes forgot that a guru cannot have dishonesty within himself or acted upon without. Dishonesty is always a disqualification. No one can be a guru who possesses a mental quantum plagued by it. No one can be a guru while dishonesty is spoken and acted upon under the plea of the centrality of the institution. Krishna consciousness is centripetal. On the contrary, the centrifugal momentum following both the zonal acharya era and the collegiate compromise, which was also called the second transformation, that centrifugal momentum is unmistakable now. Although the leaders of both of those transformations were not ordinary men, none of them were or are advanced devotees either. Although hidden, some of them may have been either quasi-Mayavadis or covert hedonists while conducting their spiritual master business. However, there's one thing we sure know. They were all skilled to varying degrees in manipulating people who came under their control, both materially and psychically. That the zonal scam was reversed by the second transformation was due to a combination of scandals and infighting amongst and between the gurus, combined with the disgruntlement of the air quotes ISKCON temple presidents, who considered themselves and were supposed to be the real Brahmins, not the pretenders. The first transformation was reversed gradually and then abruptly. Led by Ravindra Swarup, once the momentum shifted to the side of the North American Temple Presidents Association, NATPA, if those presidents, if they were real Brahmins, they should have had the foresight to confront the root issue. The legitimacy or lack thereof of all initiations previously conducted by the pretender Mahabhagavats is the root issue. Unfortunately, the insurrectionists were not real Brahmins. Despite damage control, the second transformation still kept Pandora's box open for others to be recognized as institutional gurus. Sure, it busted down the high-flying gurus to madhyams, although that was illegitimate. Why? Because sahajis do not become madhyams by simply admitting that they should never have been imitating Uttama in the first place. As we have said, and as we have said many times, and as we will continue to say, institutional guru means bogus guru. Even when that new dispensation, the second transformation, served to break up the previous monopoly, replacing one anachronism with another one, removing it from the narrative, and dismissing it via paltry rationalizations. That does not uproot deviation from the ordinary mixed. Instead, on the contrary, it solidifies it. Massive deception entered the movement and then dominated it from the late 70s up to the mid-80s. Only the biased do not recognize this now. Only dyed-in-the-wool party men continue to rationalize it. As such, was deception integral to the collegiate compromise? Was the second transformation still loaded with dishonesty? We shall answer this question. In April of 1977, Prabhupada indicated, quite clearly, as you will see, that there were no Madhyam Adhikaris in his movement. With all of the hell that went down in the decade following that room conversation, was it to be so readily projected that Madhyams were a dime a dozen in the movement by the mid-80s or before that even? The Madhyam Adhikari is an advanced devotee. He is a Vartma Pradarshaka Guru. He is a Shiksha Guru. He is qualified, even at the beginning stage, to receive the order from his Guru Maharaj to become a Diksha Guru. Then and only then, in our branch, can he begin initiating his follower with the Bhakti Lata Bij. None of those 11 pretenders were qualified to be Madhyams. Instead, they were qualified only to scrub pots in the kitchen. Did the second transformation actually overcome the root deviation? All the rot, nescience, and bogus propaganda of the Zonaracharya hoax would have to have been exposed and completely uprooted for the second transformation to have been successful. The argument was and remains as to whether or not the changes of the second transformation amounted to a real cleansing. Newcomers, and I'm talking about since the mid-80s and up to now, newcomers have never caught on to that. The chelas, the kickmes, the space cadets, the simpletons have never deeply looked into anything regarding the history of so-called ISKCON. They instead accept easy answers and one-liners as the narrative. They think, and they're encouraged to think this way, obviously, they think that all the issues had allegedly been confronted, rectified, and must therefore be now entirely dismissed. That is the cheat sheet presented by their air quotes ISKCON misleaders. All controversies of the 70s and 80s, this is according to misleader propaganda, all controversies of the 70s and the 80s should not even be brought up. It's an offense to do so. And you, dear but foolish chela, should not have any doubts about any of it. That's what they're told. Bottom line, they're told not to doubt. If such cleansing had been the case, then the all-pervading deception that was endemic to the first transformation would have been eradicated. Honesty would then, in the mid-80s, once again regain the fulcrum position it had in the 60s, although even then it got shaky. It was especially rendered meaningless via the plainclothes pick, which was loaded with deception. In the mid-80s, there was no real cleansing. The new leaders of so-called ISKCON had worked their way to the top of the turtle tank by the mid-80s, but they did not finish the job. Did they confront the root issues? Consider this. Can a disciple receive a proper initiation from a bogus guru? Is that disciple then genuine? Can an institutional guru, one who cooperates with and backs bogus gurus, be approved by his organization after waiting in queue for years and thus become a bona fide guru? These questions answer themselves. In order for someone to receive a proper initiation, he or she must receive it from a bona fide guru. There have been none of those in so-called ISKCON since November of 1977. This also means, logically, that a bogus guru only has the improperly initiated disciples. Still, the deluded newcomers have a vested interest to believe themselves, somehow or other, to be initiated. These are the transcendental facts. This is the transcendental fact. The guru is everything, not the congregation, not the institution, not the governing body of the institution. The guru. And the guru must be a very perfect man. He is far, far above all of the others. He is above the neophyte status. And he is obviously even further above the Mishra Bhakta, what to speak of the Sahajya. Let us consider the lead-up to that zonal imposition. We could begin anywhere in the mid-70s, but let us instead consolidate the timeline leading to the cratering in March of 1978. So what was the lead-up? As such, we are obliged to start with important room conversations. Obviously, the most important room conversation took place in late May of 1977 at Raman Reti and Prabhupāda's quarters with the GBC present. All of them, I think. Nevertheless, something comparably important and directly related to it took place in the Bombay Temple at Juhu Beach in April of that year. Prabhupada, what is the use of producing some rascal guru, leading secretary? Well, I have studied myself and all of your disciples, and it's a clear fact that we're all conditioned souls, so we cannot be guru. Maybe one day it may be possible, but not now. Prabhupada, Yes, I shall choose some guru. I shall say, now you become acharya, you become authorized. I'm waiting for that. You become all acharya. I retire completely, but the training must be complete. Leading secretary, the process of purification must be there. Prabhupada, oh yes, must be there. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wants that. Amara Gyaya Guru Hanya. You become guru, but be qualified. Little thing, strictly follower. Leading secretary, not rubber stamp. Prabhupada, then you'll not be effective. You can cheat, but it will not be effective. April 22nd, 1977, Bombay. This exchange is loaded. It was between Prabhupada and his leading secretary a mere 5 weeks before the aforementioned conclave at Ramanreti, and this discussion in Bombay is full of knowledge and realization. We first find reference to quote-unquote rascal guru. Prabhupada used bogus guru and rascal guru interchangeably. In the folio, you find these references almost the same number of times. The rascal guru, in relation to this room conversation with the leading secretary at Bombay, is in reference to someone who is not qualified, who is pretending to be an advanced devotee and pretending to be guru. This will be shown conclusively in the context of the full conversation as we analyze it here. TKG, yeah, he was the leading secretary, of course, and in his patented self-serving way, claims that he has studied all of Prabhupada's disciples, most certainly he had not, and has concluded that none of them are qualified to be guru. What he was actually saying in that ego assessment, disguised as humility, was that he was not so qualified, and therefore the others certainly could not be either. Tattvamasi. Consider also that he may have been deceptive, and that he actually did consider himself guru qualified, or he wanted Prabhupada to correct him and tell him that he was qualified, despite TKG's disclaimer to the opposite. Either way, his statement is flawed, at least provisionally. It is spiked with either false humility or deception or both. Then TKG adds that one day it may be possible for somebody in Prabhupada's movement to be guru, as if that was a question in and of itself. Prabhupada wanted that, and TKG knew that Prabhupada wanted his leading men to become gurus, so why make it provisional? The TKG admission here indicates something more than being a bit off. It was unwarranted, falsely motivated. So Prabhupada replies, which means that Prabhupada was suspicious of the motive that was possibly behind TKG's statement. Prabhupada actually predicates TKG in expressing this suspicion. Then comes at first a one-word reply from Prabhupada. What was that one word? Remember what TKG said. He said, none of us are qualified. And what is Prabhupada's response to that statement? Yes! Prabhupada is agreeing with TKG, namely that none of his disciples, as of the 4th week of April 1977, is qualified to be guru. Does this affirmation by Prabhupada mean that he is saying none of his disciples can be the acharya, capital A, in the true sense of the term? That none of them can be the successor? It most definitely does not mean that. He's not referring to that level of guru, and this will be proven conclusively as we go on. Prabhupada's reply that he shall choose some guru. Oh yeah. An initial response to this statement in the minds of many would mean that Prabhupada was going to appoint either one guru or more than one guru in the future. This presupposition is not established. It's not firm. Furthermore, he will recognize the guru he provisionally may select by making it clear that he would officially appoint him. This appointment would not be covert or secretive. It would be official. That is the mukhya vritti. You can make gauna vritti indirect interpretations of it, but the mukhya vritti, the direct interpretation, is that if he appoints a guru, it will be official, not covert or secretive. And he never did, because he had the free will to choose not to do so, because no one was qualified. Then Prabhupada says, you all become acharya. This corresponds to his later answer to a reporter, meaning some months later, quote unquote, all my disciples will take the legacy. This is a well-known response by Prabhupada. That later statement was in the indisputable context that Prabhupada was saying that he was not going to appoint a successor, which he most definitely did not. The transcription of this Bombay room conversation by the folio puts the first letter of Acharya in downcase. That was the correct decision by those editors, as Prabhupada was not in this room conversation referring to the Acharya, because the Acharya would be the successor and he must be an Uttama Adhikari. Prabhupada then reaffirms what has already been stated when he said yes at the beginning of this room conversation, his first reply. He is waiting for that, meaning that he is waiting for one of his disciples to man up and become qualified to receive recognition and appointment as a qualified guru. Then he adds to this statement that he's waiting a distinct restriction. Quote, but the training must be complete, unquote. This means, very obviously, that none of his leading men had fully taken the training. They had not fully taken the training he had given to all of them, and all of the other disciples for that matter, in order to become a pure devotee of the Lord. Prabhupada goes on to affirm that he would retire completely once there was somebody, preferably more than one, from his many disciples to be qualified to be guru. This logically means that the governing body commissioners had not done what they were supposed to do. One of the two most important objectives in creating the GBC in 1970 was to facilitate Prabhupada's retirement. As some of you know, we recently dedicated a KCD monthly audio to this topic, proving it beyond doubt. And that meant proving that the GBC men did not accomplish that major objective. TKG replies that purification must be there, meaning that neither himself nor his godbrothers were purified of Maya influence, which is obvious now, especially considering what went down. TKG affirms that Lord Chaitanya wants that those who represent him be only devotees, pure devotees. Prabhupada expands upon it, quote, but be qualified. Obviously, because none of his disciples were qualified. Prabhupada wanted and needed pure devotees, but there were none to select from. Then Prabhupada adds 4 very important words. We hinted about this just a little bit earlier. What were those 4 words? Quote, little thing, simply follower, unquote. Realize the meaning. As mentioned previously, the context of everything which preceded this was not Uttama Adhikari. It was not Mahabhagavat. It was not referring to a successor. He was referring to Madhyam Adhikari. That is confirmed by little thing. It is not and never will be a little thing to become a siddha, to become Brahma realized in the true sense of the term. On the contrary, it is a very rare attainment. It is a very, very big thing. However, Prabhupada was not referring to that level in any part of this Bombay room conversation. He was referring to strictly following, which begins at the Madhyam platform. It is a misconception to believe that a Madhyam Udhikari is not a pure devotee. He is preliminarily purified on the Brahmabhuta platform. He is nishtha. He has firm faith. He's completely fixed up. He is a qualified sannyasi even if he is still in the Grihastha ashram. And he is qualified to receive the order to become an initiating spiritual master. In Prabhupada's branch of Lord Chaitanya's line, such a disciple must receive Prabhupada's direct order to become an initiating spiritual master. This is what is also neglected by almost everybody. They think they can go on Lord Chaitanya's generic statement. No. That is not correct. That is very much incorrect, and it's very much obviously self-motivated. Anybody can see that who's free from bias and prejudice. Now, in this Bombay conversation, it's indirectly indicated. But it is confirmed beyond any doubt during the GBC conclave in Prabhupada's room at Ramanreti, a mere 5 weeks later, but by my order. And he did not give the order in either of those room conversations. Then TKG adds, quote unquote, not rubber stamp. Prabhupada was not going to rubber stamp an unqualified disciple to become guru. So what's being referred to here? Why did he say that? What can only be inferred by this reference by TKG to rubber stamping is the governing body commission. Such a conclusion was evidenced in the years that followed 1977 because that was what the GBC engaged in through repeated concoctions. It rubber-stamped the 11 great pretenders, the Zonlacharyas. It then rubber-stamped 3 other gurus to join them after the inimical split with Gaudiya Math. It then, very briefly, concocted a form of the rubber stamp via a no 3 blackballs procedure. Then the party man who wanted to be guru had to secure recommendations from 3 gurus in order to receive the GBC rubber stamp. And since then, there has to be a wait in a queue for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and if the party man keeps his nose clean and does not engage in any scandal, he receives a no objection certificate to become an initiating guru. All of these concoctions are but variations of rubber stamp. Was TKG getting a flash? Was he getting a flash of what the future was going to be? And if so, then notice the irony, because he was one of the first to receive the GBC imprimatur rubber stamp, although that fact was disguised by the deception that Prabhupada had allegedly appointed the 11 as spiritual masters when he only appointed them as Ritviks in the summer of 1977. And there would be so much turmoil after they captured the Gadi through that deception. So many egregious fall downs, although they were already fallen, and so many scandals. And the movement careened out of control. The train came off the track at high speed, and spiritual lives were lost or severely damaged, or at the very least negatively impacted. Prabhupada, being Tri Kala Gya, knew this as a possibility if his movement fell victim to fate after losing its connection to Providence, and that was going on even before he left. He tells TKG that due to lack of purification, if the institutional rubber stamp was the method, then such gurus would have no meaning. He says it would be cheating. And he concludes, quote, "You can cheat, but it will not be effective," unquote. Which means there would be no spiritual sequence in anything done in his movement via cheap gurus and cheap disciples, which is what has been going on since 1978. The situation of guru scandals and or blatant fall-downs became egregiously obvious in the mid-80s. Professor Blueblood distributed his initial treatise in the latter half of '84, and that position paper spread. When 3 more institutional gurus were exposed for illicit sex with their disciples, one of the homosexual variety, the levee broke. The whole thing was bungled. Do today's newcomers to so-called ISKCON even know anything about this? The second transformation proved ineffective. It was supposed to clean up the nescience of the zonal era, but simply busting down pretender Mahabhagavats, who were already Sahajas, busting them down, so-called, to Madhyams, is but another pretension. 3 Sahajas were removed from their Diksha Guru posts, but no one else was really disciplined at all. Bogus gurus were allowed to remain in good standing and keep their disciples, and those disciples were considered to still be genuinely initiated by the newly transformed cult, but they weren't. This is at the core of the problem with the second transformation. If it even had the potential to right the ship, and that's debatable, the collegiate compromise did not do so. Half-truth means no truth, and that new dispensation did not actually turn things around. It changed the deck chairs, made some new arrangements, and the ship's passengers were treated a bit better for a while. But by not eradicating the root nescience, it only increased the cult's dishonesty. History will establish that the second transformation must certainly be judged a complete failure. All of the great pretenders at that time would have had to have been removed for it to have accomplished anything of real value, vastu, of real substance, via institutional purification. All disciples initiated by the imitators would have to have been acknowledged as lacking standing because they were improperly initiated. In the new dispensation of the mid-80s, however, they were again used to prop up another institutional delusion, along with the so-called Uttamas, the so-called zonal acharyas, who agreed to cooperate by being allegedly busted down to so-called madhyams. In essence, the song remained the same, but the music was slowing. Many believed in the transformation, but they believed in it superficially, not deep within. Only the dyed-in-the-wool fanatics believed in any of it deep within themselves. Of course, so-called ISKCON was quite expert, and remains so, at creating fanatics out of the new people, insincere, all of them. So true believers were and are not at all rare in that cult. The Ritvik heresy of late 1989 would soon surface to disturb a short period of improved interface, but another internecine war then emerged. The second transformation brought in new dogma, and just like the first transformation of the zonal scheme, it had to be accepted by all. Those who did not do so were then branded when so-called ISKCON was forced to circle the wagons in order to fend off Ritvik. This was especially the case in criticizing Ritvik leaders. The mothership would realize the danger, but it had set the stage for the Ritvik emergence. Ritvik was not advocating any kind of middle ground with so-called ISKCON. It demanded that all initiations be recognized as only Ritvik initiations. All, air quotes, ISKCON conductors of initiation could and would be only Ritviks. When it came to hard Ritvik, That would mean ad infinitum, which is certainly fanaticism. Soft Ritvik is a different concoction. Since just after Prabhupada departed physical manifestation, there have been 3 major, all of them utterly unauthorized, transformations of what now only appears to be his branch of Lord Chaitanya's Hare Krishna movement. These transformations are all under the strong grip of deception, and air quotes ISKCON dishonesty is the most institutionalized of the lot. An initial anomaly was injected by the Asara Gaudiya Math via a man who had no influence whatsoever in Prabhupada's branch of the Hare Krishna movement. Hardly anyone active in the movement even knew about him, or his name even. Besides that, this Prabhupada godbrother was not well known even by the majority of Prabhupada's leading men. Yet all of a sudden, he became prominent in 1978, providing fertile soil for the group and individual apotheosis of the 11 seeds which sprouted from the fertile soil he gave to them. And those 11 men all became massive enjoyers. They were the greatest enjoyers on the face of the earth at that time. They were confident that their dishonesty in securing their statuses as alleged Mahabhagavats and successors would not be spotted by most of the devotees in the movement, particularly in the short run, when they could get that traction. And they were right about that. And such confidence and audacity on their parts proved warranted. This principle of the vast majority of cult members not seeing things as they are within the movement, one which they compulsively and foolishly served and continue to serve, it's still going on strong today. However, the short run of the first transformation ended long ago, didn't it? Toppling the zonal scam and replacing it with another deep fake has many devotees condemning the 11 great pretenders at this time. They didn't then, though. Yet those devotees who condemn them, those fellows still remain bamboozled. The internet will continue to provide a means to spread the message that any new transition in the future is nothing more than a resultant of past factors, which is the case today. It will be nothing but a continued neglect to rectify the embedded dharmasya glani and to confront the root issues of deviation still underlying and still active in so-called ISKCON. You cannot make progress in becoming a devoted siddha in any of those major deviations. But the fanatics in each of them are aggressively paranoid in their shaky confidence that they're still right. They still believe they're the true believers. They're the true believers that their particular cult, although deviated from Guru Parampara, somehow or other, it's still bona fide. And it isn't. If you come into contact with any of them, you'll find this out for yourself. You need protection from this mud of Kali Yuga. So you need not intentionally walk into it. If you do enter it, you'll find out just how contaminated and layered in Maya each of the 3 major deviations is. That may astound you. It may even shock you. The whole of so-called ISKCON is led by former 5th-class men, mlechas, who did not take spiritual training, but still posed and are posing themselves as advanced devotees and spiritual masters. Instead, they are only masters or advanced in cult manipulation, running a psyop experiment from which they benefit in many obvious and unseen ways as they control their chelas in order to continue to exploit them. This is described in some detail in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, but it was also described a bit earlier in that great work. Kalkihi kale kalamalat prapatu tharmavanayora kritavataraha. Quote, may the very great incarnation of Kalki, the protector of religious principles, protect us from the dirt of Kali Yuga, unquote. The colossal hoax, known as the fabricated so-called ISKCON Confederation, is a pseudo-spiritual scam. Those who run that show bottle have a trump card, which they can always play when one of their chelas finally discovers where his so-called guru is really at. If you want to survive and remain sane, it is incumbent upon you to come to some rather harsh and painful realizations. It's a spiritual wasteland out there. It is so primarily because deviant cults are degrading Krishna consciousness in the name of spreading it. This is mostly being carried out by wizards who pretend to be advanced devotees and Vaishnavas. It is your duty to break away from their psychic grip and everything related to the black hole they want to suck you into. And if you break away at that time, when you leave them, you will come to know what your glorified leader's actual name is. It does not contain any of those great brandings such as Swami, Goswami, Shri, Srila, or Prabhupāda, or Acharya Dev. Your so-called glorified leader is only a master of cult manipulation, and nothing more than that. But he has a trump card he can play at the end when you finally realize it. As such, the follower breaks away and no longer considers or calls himself a disciple of that man. Maybe, in some rare case, he even has the stones to call his former leader according to his real name. And what is his real name? Bogus Guru. The improperly initiated disciple may choose to blame the bogus guru for all of the physical, psychic, and social turmoil which he has to undergo in the wake of his escape. And all of that is substantial and enduring, let me tell you. That is when that so-called guru, if there is the confrontation between the two, he'll play that trump card right from the bottom of the deck. He will tell his disciples only once, because there's no need to repeat it, that you, disciple, you wanted to be cheated. It's on you, not on me. He will tell him, you're to blame. Most unfortunately, there's truth to that. Think about these things. Sadeva Samya